The next slide. Today's session presenters are Nancy Schindler, PhD, and Maria Giovanni, PhD. I am your host, Tim Long. Our chat and question and answer lead is Shalinda Wilkins. A few housekeeping things, if you would please. Would you mute your microphone so that we don't have any background interference during the presentations? And write any questions you might have via the chat or share at the end during the Q&A session. Who we are, UCMFP, University of California Master Food Preserver online program. We are a community outreach, online-based, grant-funded volunteer program through the University of California Cooperative Extension that provides up-to-date research-based information on food safety and preservation. Our mission is to keep Californians safe and well as they use culturally appropriate research-based practices to safely preserve food in the home, reducing food waste, increasing food security, and providing engaging ways for Californians to explore healthy food. Please note, any statements about products used or highlighted in this presentation are not meant to promote, endorse, or oppose an outside entity's product or service. And the speakers in this event are not receiving compensation. We are all volunteers. Today's goals. Number one, relay the steps involved with making a low sugar peach jalapeno jelly with Pomona's universal pectin, sometimes called PUP. Secondly, to identify 4 areas to consider when using peaches and jalapenos in a canning process. And thirdly, to relay the steps involved with canning a late summer supply of peaches for a peach pie filling. This is a survey reminder. We need your input. Survey questions were completed upon registration to provide us a sense of your knowledge coming into the event. When the Zoom session closes, a post-event survey will pop up in your browser to give us a sense of your knowledge after the event. It's important to us that we get feedback on what knowledge you have gained and the quality of the event we have provided. This will help us improve our content and delivery for the future. Thank you in advance for your time. And now I'll turn it over to Nancy for our first presentation.
Nancy, you're muted.
Thanks so much. We're here talking about late summer surplus, and I want to thank Tim for a wonderful opening for our program tonight. We're dealing with, for me, peach jalapeno jelly. I wanted to make a jelly from the late summer peaches that I had gathered because I had an idea. I liked the little bit of heat with the peach flavor, and I had an idea of what I was going to do with it once we got it done. So let's get started. I wanted to give you a little background about the recipe itself. It's a low sugar cooked jelly made with Pomona's universal pectin. You know, the low sugar can be a benefit for individuals with diabetes or other health needs. And so I wanted to try that and see what the actual flavor was in the end. This recipe is sponsored by Pomona Pectin, but as they mentioned earlier, it's not an endorsement of Pomona Pectin. The recipe actually was made for Pomona Pectin. So that's why I selected it. Again, the benefit is that pectin doesn't contain sugar or preservatives, so that can be helpful health-wise. But it also is nice to know that when you go to try to create the gelling, it will do it reliably with an addition of a low sweetener amount in there. The author that created this was Allison Carol Duffy, and she did that especially for Pomona Pectin. I wanted to identify, before we get into it, any concerns that we might have. As was mentioned earlier, our mission is to help individuals understand the safety concerns and to do a good job in their being able to make their jams and preserve things. So the first concern that I identified when I was looking at this recipe was, okay, what kind of produce do I want to pick? We have two kinds typically of peaches that are out there. You have the yellow and the white. And when I looked up the pH for them, I came to the understanding that fit in the low or the high acid area. And so it's about 3.30 to about 4.05. So it would fit in this area right here. But when you take a look at the different types, you learn that there is a need to distinguish between the yellow and the white. Oh, somehow I've got a annotate going. So what we've got going is when you look at the two different peach types, people will say, well, why can't I use the white? And what we find out is that the white actually has a little bit higher, it's 4.6. And so it would move things up acidic level wise. And so the recommendation when you're making any kind of peach preserves or jellies, jams, etc., is to use the yellow peaches and not the white peaches. As you keep going, the next issue that becomes a concern is the acidity, because we're adding in another vegetable, and most vegetables tend to be on the low acidic level. So we've got our peaches in there, which are high acidic, and we've got a low acidic being brought together. Obviously, that's going to change the nature of what we're preserving. And when I did some investigation, I found that peppers tend to fall in the 4.8 to 6.0 range, and that would really pull the low acidity, the high acidity of the peaches towards the low acidity level. So there's a big change there, and you've got to compensate for that. So I had to decide kind of in my recipe what I was going to do to face that acidity challenge. The other thing that you want to think about is the level of heat that you want to include. And you can, for this recipe, it was made known that you can use any pepper that you want to. They recommend a half of like a sweet pepper and then half of a jalapeno pepper. But you can only use 1 cup of a total of both. So if you wanted to change up the recipe, you could have it mostly be jalapeno, but it would be only as much as 1 cup. Or you could have it be more of the sweet pepper than the jalapeno to kind of bring down the heat. But the total amount of peppers used always needs to be about 1 cup in this recipe. The final item that you need to consider is processing method. And we need to consider that in terms of this acidity challenge. When we are preserving, typically we would think of pressure canners being used for low acid food products. But in this case, we're doing mostly with the peach. And so we're going to, in the recipe, add a vinegar, which is an acid, and that's going to bring or balance that out. And so in the process, you can use the processing method of either water bath canning or steam canner, and I chose to use the water bath. But you wouldn't want to use the pressure canner, and we can talk about that more in a little bit. So let's get started. Basically what we're doing is gathering all our tools. You can see all the jars are ready and all the measuring and the tools used in doing the water bath canning. The ingredients for the recipe are as followed. 4.5 pounds of peaches, and they're going to be blanched and then cut up and pitted. In my choice, I decided to go half and half bell pepper, so a half a cup and a half a cup of jalapeno, and then a cup of vinegar, 3/4 of a cup of vinegar, and the recommendation is either white or the apple cider, and I like the apple cider, so I chose that. The big deal about all that, though, is when you're choosing the vinegar, make sure it's 5% acidic rate. And then you need your pectin, and in the pectin box, there is a dry packet of ingredients for the pectin, and then there's this calcium package that's a little bit smaller, and you need both of them to do the gelling process. The last thing is a cup of 1 1/4 cup of sugar. As always, we're going to emphasize safety and sanitation. So just as a quick reminder, remember that we need to have our own personal hygiene ready, washing hands, making sure you're wearing clean clothes, that the counter surfaces are clean, even making sure your towels are clean, not sitting on a shoulder. And then in terms of your food products, you're going to want to make sure that they're rinsed carefully and prepared for the processing. And lastly, you want to take care of your jars and lids. And many times you don't have to sterilize them if it's 10 minutes or more that the processing time is going to be. This recipe goes for 10 minutes when we're going to be processing, but the recipe recommended that the jars and the lids would be sterilized. Okay. So pre-prep, what do we need to do? Well, obviously we need to get the peppers ready. And just a recommendation, when you're using the hot peppers, always have some gloves on and be careful of touching your face or eyes or whatever you might be doing. In the process of getting the peppers, I wanted it to look pretty. So I opened them up, cut them in half, took out the membrane and all the seeds, and then I would cut them into strips. And then we would take the strips, line them up, and cut them into little cubes, and they float in the jelly really nicely. To prepare the peaches, you need to do a process of blanching, and I did a little video that hopefully will kind of give you an idea, and I'll kind of show you. You need a saucepan that's deep enough to hold your peaches, and it needs to be rolling boil of water. And then you need another bowl or saucepan that has ice water in it. And you're going to take the peaches, you take the stems out, turn them over onto the bottom area and make an X. And what this will do is will help with the peeling process once that it's done. And so you plop it down into the boiling water, being careful not to burn yourself. And then you do about 30 seconds and you're waiting to see if that X starts to peel away a little bit. And when it does, then you're going to want to pull it out after that time frame and stick it right into the ice water and let it sit for another like 30 seconds, and then you can take it out and start to peel it. So that's the blanching process. Once that's done, you're going to create a peach solution. So you take the peaches and you're going to take the pits out and you're going to cut them up into slices, and you can either chunk them and boil them that way, or I felt like I wanted to really have a good puree, and so I put them in a blender and blended it down. Once I had blended it down, I put it into my saucepan, added, I believe it's a cup of water or half a cup of water into the pot, and then you boil that and process that just in a few short minutes. Once that's ready, then what you're going to do is try to strain it, because we have a jelly consistency that we want. We don't want a jam. And so what you're going to want to do is get any remaining pulp out of there. And you can do this once, or you can actually do it twice. But we want to end up with about 4 cups of this solution, this peach solution. So I used a funnel cup underneath, and then put something, put some of the mesh on top of it, and then you just let it soak down for a couple hours, maybe 4 hours. You can put it in the refrigerator and let it drain down. Okay. Once that's done, then you're ready to make your final mixture. And so I do the peppers first. You put them in a pan, put some of the acid in there, and you cook it for a little bit. Once it's ready, you take solution, your peach solution, and add that in. And now you've got your peach and pepper mixture. what we need to do now is get ready to create the gelling aspect of the jelly. And so now we're going to go to the pomona pectin. You have a bag of pectin and you have a bag of calcium. And the first thing that you need to have done is do calcium water. And the recipe recommends that you do that even before you start the rest of the process. You can put it in a jar that has a lid and shake it really well to make it. But there's a certain amount that you put in there with some water, and then you can set it aside. If you don't use all of that in the recipe, then you can put that in the refrigerator and use it for another batch down the road. But now in the process, we're ready to add the pectin. And so to do that, you get the pectin out of the package in a certain amount, and then you have an amount of sugar that you are going to include in the recipe. And then you mix those two together. And then the final step is to mix it into the peach and jalapeno mixture. When we're processing, we're going to boil this down. Once that pectin gets in there, you're going to stir it really vigorously. And then when it's ready, it'll start to thicken and everything, and you'll be ready to put it into your jars. Hopefully your jars are ready. You pull them out of the canner that you've had them in to sterilize them, fill them. And once you want to, once they're done, you're going to put them on a side bar area with a towel underneath it so that the direct heat is not on your countertop, and allow it to kind of process for 12 to 24 hours. My goal was to use it then as a dish with pork tenderloin. And so after I had done it and stored it away, I pulled it out, melted it, and then I prepared my pork tenderloin. You salt and pepper the pork tenderloin on each side, and then you start pouring the mixture on top, and then you place it on a grill. And I have a little Ninja grill I like to use, but you could do it on an outside grill. And then you just grill it and pour the remaining on the top, and you're ready to serve.
Okay, Shalinda, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Have I missed anything for questions for Nancy?
No, there are no questions currently. I will keep monitoring. Thank you.
No questions at this point. Okay, then our next presenter is Maria, who's going to talk about peach pie filling.
Well, I'll add very quick while we transition to Maria. Something I probably should have brought in the beginning. If you have any questions for Nancy, please, we can address them at the end when we go to the Q&A for Maria. But if you also have questions you'd like to share via chat, you're not comfortable speaking up, put them in the chat. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Nancy. Can you see the screen that says peach pie filling?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Always want to be sure before I start talking. So really appreciate everyone coming. As Tim and Nancy have mentioned, I know I'm up here in Butte County. We have still peaches that have been stored and are ready to process into something different. Maybe they're not quite as beautiful as they were in the middle of the summer. So making the jelly or peach pie filling is a great way to use these peaches. And so I wanted to start by just noting Nancy's really provided most of the introduction as far as making sure you read the recipe, gathering all your tools and ingredients, and cleaning and sanitizing your work areas. And also, you don't see it here, but pre-measuring the ingredients is really a great idea. And we did do that after we collect all the information. So one of the things I wanted to mention about making pie filling is that it uses a product called Clear Gel. Clear Gel is, I checked, is not a trademark product. You can buy a variety of different brands. And it's a special starch that allows the pie filling to have the right thickness and also clarity. Cornstarch, other kinds of starches will clump up and make the pie filling cloudy. So make sure you're using Clear Gel. It's basically not about the same price as a starch. So the other thing that is different in terms of peaches, many of you may have had cling peaches, which cling to the pit. That's why they're called cling peaches. And they are best for canning like halves or also making pie filling or slices because they have the best texture for canning. They don't get soft during the canning process like a Freestone peach does. And I did check the pH as Nancy was talking about pH differences. The pH of cling peaches is also low enough that it's considered a high acid product, although there is a little bit of lemon juice added to this recipe. We always want to make sure our pH is low enough and also helps preserve the color. So this is a picture of taking the peach slices off the pit. We've gone ahead and blanched and peeled them like Nancy had pointed out. So after the peaches are sliced, then boil them for 1 minute. As Nancy mentioned, also the jars, because this does process for 30 minutes, the jars don't need to be pre-sterilized, but you do want to keep them warm before they're filled. So, so for me in this situation, we did use a boiling water bath. So my jars are keeping warm in the water bath, and I boiled my peaches. Then make the syrup and make sure the syrup boils. And so we've already added the sugar and the clear gel. And just like Nancy said, mixing those two together helps to disperse the starch, the clear gel or the pectin throughout the mixture. So once the syrup has boiled, add the peaches and cook it. And then, we did add some cinnamon. You can add a spice or a little bit of almond extract or something that you'd like. And remember, you can always season your foods after you've canned them when you go to preserve them. So the next step then is to fill the jars. So here we go. The jars are warm. We pulled them out of the water bath and dried them out. And then also debubbling. So that is done by running, in this case, this is a headspace measure up and down the sides of the jar that takes any air bubbles out. You want to be able to do that so that you've got a nice solid pack of peaches or whatever you're canning, and also just keeps the product safe because you have the same pH and same mixtures throughout. So check the headspace, and then the jars, like Nancy showed, same process. The jars go into the hot water bath process and cool. Another thing that I learned in becoming a master food preserver is how to check the seal. So once they've pulled off the next day, remove the bands and then pick up the jar by the lid. I always keep my hand underneath it. And if you can pick up the jar by the lid, that means you have a good tight seal. And this is a picture of the final product. As you can tell, it's nice and clear. It actually made a pie with it, and it got eaten before I could take a picture. Okay. And we will be providing all these recipes. We have a handout that'll be shared with you in a few minutes.
All right, are there any specific questions for Maria, or if you thought of something for Nancy, this would be a good time. I'm not seeing any questions myself. How about you, Shalinda?
I didn't have a question, but there was a comment. They wanted to know if you were using instant clear gel or the cook type of clear gel. Because you had a picture of it, but they weren't sure which one. So if you, Maria.
Yeah, thank you. Just the regular clear gel that you have to cook. I didn't even realize, thank you, Benita, that there's an instant. So I did use the kind that you cook.
Okay, Maria, if you will advance, please. So in summary,
So Tim,
yeah,
any live questions? That was chat. Is there anyone who'd like to ask a live question of either presenter? And if you're speaking, you're probably muted, so you'll have to unmute yourself first.
Francine, I see your hand up.
Hello, I'm a newbie. I actually just had my first pie filling class on Sunday and absolutely fell in love with it. I think I was more intimidated by making sure botulism doesn't occur in my product. So I guess how do you know? I mean, even, okay, so I followed all the steps, step by step. We had the volunteers help us. But I guess when I'm at home trying to follow these same things, how is there a way to know if you're doing something wrong? Or do you have like tips for the newbies here who are just getting into this to make sure certain steps to make sure, absolutely make sure that no one gets sick from, us doing this canning? I guess that's always been my fear.
Right. So I've been canning for a long time and actually studied food science. If you're working with fruit, you're fine. And the best thing to do, and also you'll be able to check, is to go to a trusted source of information. And the best place to go is to the National Center for Home Food Preservation. So that is, those recipes have all been tested. A lot of things you see on the internet have not been tested. So it's really important that you use the National Center or our University of California Master Food Preserver. And I'm sure we'll get the links in for you also.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you do want to venture and can, I just had this conversation with someone, vegetables and especially meat, then those recipes are also there. But you do need a pressure canner. So that's a whole different, I don't want to say can of worms, but that's not very, very attractive.
Oh, I do have one more question. So how hot or what temperature are we to be using when we're boiling our jars? How hot is it? How hot should we make sure that they're getting while they're boiling?
Well, it's not so much the heat, because water boils at a certain temperature, right?
Okay.
But what you're concerned about is how long
Okay.
to be able to kill those microorganisms.
Okay. And then with these recipes that you guys are going to give us, it'll tell us how long we should boil, let it rest before we pull it out and everything.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's where she was talking about a standard, researched recipe. They will always give you that information. And then they give you charts and things like that go with it too, to help you know, because remember, if you're at a different altitude,
Right.
you're going to need to make some changes for that.
Okay. Okay.
Were
Well,
you
thank you
asking
very
about
much.
sterilizing the jars before or for after they were filled, or both?
Both.
Yeah. So yeah, Nancy was talking about after they were filled. If it processes less than 10 minutes, then you do need to boil the jars beforehand. Like she said, water boils, well, depending on your altitude, but at 212. And so that's, and if it's acidic, and again, we're talking about hot water bath canning, the pH will be low enough so the botulism spores don't germinate. So, and remember, pH is what we call an inverse scale. So a high pH means it's a low in acid, so it can be confusing. So and I've been teaching this for a long time and I still get confused. So so it's always good to double check.
Okay. And then when you're talking about the pH levels, is that something that we have to understand or know, or is it just because you guys have researched the recipes already, it's just okay, get these kind of peaches, use these certain ingredients, and then you'll be okay?
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, because I was getting kind of scared when she was showing that pH chart. I was all like, okay, I think I'm gonna back away from preserving now.
No. Everything's been tested and it has a margin of safety in there too. So you're fine with that. Yeah, you don't need that. And I've heard of people using like home pH measures, like for swimming pools. Those are not accurate enough. So you don't need to worry about measuring it. You just follow the recipe. Make sure you add the acid, or if you use lemon juice, this is important. Make sure you use a commercial lemon juice, because all those lovely lemons we get off our trees vary in pH. And so you want to use something that's been standardized. Nancy mentioned that too, with the vinegar. Vinegar sometimes is only 4% acid, so you want to make sure you have at least 5.
Okay, perfect.
And Francine, the reason that I put that up there is just for you to have a knowledge kind of what's going on. How in my circumstance, in any circumstance, you want to balance the acid with the non-acid. And so you want to make sure there's enough in there that's going to kill the microorganisms over time. But you can't always know what the exact pH is. Other people have researched it, but if you go with a tested recipe, then you can be assured that it should be in the right range.
Perfect. I think I will definitely go with tested recipes. Thank you,
Nancy.
ladies.
Nancy, I see that Sharon also asked if she could use Splenda instead of regular sugar in the jelly.
And you can, I believe you can. You would get a little brochure in the box of the Pomona pectin, and it would help you know what the conversions would be. That's the whole idea, is to reduce the amount of sugar. And I know I kept thinking, well, that's a lot of sugar for this non-sugar type thing, but it reduces the pectin sugar that contributes as well. So
if there's no more questions, to kind of summarize tonight, creating jellies and pie fillings are an easy solution to your abundance of peaches at the end of the season. Future education and involvement. If you would, please sign up for our email list to receive notices about upcoming events. Sign up for our newsletter via, well, that's coming next month, and you'll hear more about that, I know, because I'm on that committee. Find us on Facebook, search for www.facebook.com UCMFP, which stands for University of California Master Food Preservers. And please like us, it helps. I think there's one more. Maria?
Nancy, I'm sorry. Nancy, I have a quick question. You
Yes,
did
ma'am.
mention about white peaches at the beginning of your presentation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you. It says, did you say the white flesh peaches can't be canned?
They recommend that they aren't used in a canning process. You can freeze them and you can dehydrate them, but because of their higher alkalinity, they're not so acid, they don't have any tested recipes out there right now. And they don't have any recipes, since they're more on the alkaline level, they don't have any pressure canning recipes that have been tested and researched yet either. So the recommendation is that you would use the yellow peaches if you're going to do any canning processes. Does that meet your needs, Shalinda?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, some resources for tonight include the National Center for Food Preservation, the United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, the UCANR, or we like to refer to it as UCANR, which is the University of California Ag and Natural Resources. And the peach pie filling, it does, if you have access to it, appear in the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving 2020 version on page 173.
And these will be in a handout. Both mine and hers are in the URLs and anything else, sources.
Right. The peach recipe is also in another book that we like to use called So Easy to Preserve. And it also is on the National Center for Home Food Preservation website.
Okay, next slide.
Yep. Sorry.
Some upcoming events, jamming with HMP Pectin is tomorrow night, actually. Zucchini mocked and dehydrated will be on the 21st, another 6:30 to 7 p.m. Fruit leathering, just like tonight, from 6 to 6:30 or so, and that's on 10/22 next week. And zucchini, the cold, dry facts, on October 25th. I believe that's it for this evening. We appreciate you coming. And check for the online survey that should pop up on your viewer after this Zoom meeting is over. Thanks for attending, and we hope you will attend future presentations as well. Thank you to Nancy and Maria for their presentations. You were great ladies. And for
Thank
Samantha
you.
and checking on us all the time.
Thank you.
And I just want to mention, we do have a Facebook page, so questions can also come into the UC Master Food Preserver link. And so any questions that you have, you can also always call your county office, although it's sometimes hard to get a hold of advisors.
Maria, could you go back up to the page that has the survey preview?
Oh, it's way back.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again, everyone, for joining us. There was a mention of a handout. So when this Zoom session ends, when you close your Zoom in your browser, a survey will pop up. It'll have questions very similar to what you completed when you registered for this. These questions are basically to assess if you gain some knowledge and answer honestly. Our feelings won't be hurt. It is anonymous. And also just about quality of the presentation. As a reward, when you complete that survey, I will email you a copy of the handout that was discussed. So we created a short handout with the recipes. They were presented in this event. If you have any issues with the survey, don't hesitate to contact me. I'll put my email in the chat. So I want everyone to be able to get this reward for joining us tonight. And again, the survey is just for us to make sure that we're providing you with the best product and allow us to continue presenting to the public. This session was recorded, and I will make that recording, have that recording posted to the statewide website in the coming 2 weeks. Again, we have events coming up, so I appreciate if you guys are interested joining us, and I'll stay on for a couple minutes if anyone has any additional questions. Otherwise, thank you again for joining us in our first live event for the online program.